The explosion never came, but something far worse did. At 4:12 in the morning, the coastal radar station near Puerto La Cruz jolted to life with a surge so violent the screens briefly froze. An unidentified object was tearing through the upper atmosphere too clean, too silent, too precise to belong to Venezuela. For 8 seconds, no one in the control room moved. Then, every alarm in the facility erupted at once. When the visual feed finally stabilized, the shock deepened. This was not a U.S. surveillance drone. It was not a Chinese commercial platform. It was a Russian AI-enhanced reconnaissance drone flying along a corridor that only the highest levels of Caracas should have known existed. And yet, Moscow had launched it anyway. If Russia could enter Venezuelan airspace without permission, then who truly commanded the skies? What had Caracas traded, quietly, secretly, in exchange for this level of access? And more importantly, was this the moment the balance of power in the Caribbean began to shift? At first, Washington thought the overflight meant nothing. A symbolic gesture, a simple reminder to President Nicolas Maduro that Moscow still stood by him, nothing more. But within hours, that assumption collapsed. U.S. Navy listening posts began picking up strange electronic pulses, drifting from Venezuela's northern coast signals matching Russian battlefield networks used in Eastern Europe. These weren't environmental anomalies. They were military fingerprints. Then another anomaly surfaced. Civilian air traffic logs recorded a wave of oil technicians arriving in Caracas. Yet their passports didn't correspond to any petroleum institution. They traced directly back to Russian military academies. Across Venezuelan bases, Chinese commercial drones were quietly pulled into hangars. When they emerged, they were repainted in military gray, their software replaced with encrypted Russian code. What once resembled cooperation was evolving into something far more one-sided. Piece by piece, the pattern sharpened. Moscow wasn't supporting Venezuela. Moscow was embedding itself inside Venezuela. And that led to the question no one in Caracas dared to confront. Had Venezuela stepped into a partnership or a trap it could no longer escape? The deeper investigators dug, the clearer the truth became. Nothing began with the drone at 4:12 in the morning. The shift had started months earlier, quietly, invisibly, and dangerously. At 4:22 in the morning, an Aleutian cargo jet descended into Caracas under a false manifest labeled agricultural sensors. The tarmac crews, accustomed to these flights, expected crates of equipment. Instead, they found matte black cylindrical pods cushioned in shock-resistant foam, each housing an AI processor modeled after Russian battlefield automation systems. By sunrise, those pods had already vanished into a Venezuelan naval facility. There, Russian hydrology consultants technicians under diplomatic cover began splicing the hardware into coastal surveillance towers. The objective was unmistakable: create a predictive defensive skin capable of tracking and forecasting U.S. Navy movements across the Caribbean. But this was only the first layer. 3 days later, at 2:15 in the afternoon, the frigate Guayquerí abruptly switched off its transponder near La Tortuga Island. Satellite imagery exposed a Russian vessel positioned alongside it, a narrow bridge of steel planks connecting the two hulls. Crates passed across long, angular, unmistakably built for war. Witnesses described them quietly: drones the size of wolves, autonomous hybrid strike units powered by Russian microturbines and Chinese sensor suites engineered for coordinated swarm attacks. Far to the north, a U.S. Navy destroyer intercepted erratic bursts of encrypted radio traffic pulsing from the region. The sophistication was far beyond Venezuela's capabilities. Pentagon analysts reached a chilling conclusion. Russia was using Venezuela as a forward testing field far from European scrutiny to experiment with saturation tactics designed to overwhelm U.S. naval assets. And the escalation continued. At 1:46 in the morning, an American satellite detected heat signatures inside a coastal bunker. Analysts later confirmed it. A digital shield was being assembled, an electronic warfare dome modeled after Chinese systems deployed during tense Pacific standoffs. Once active, it could blind low Earth orbit surveillance, hiding battalions, or foreign advisors entirely from view. Still, one question overshadowed every discovery. Why had Caracas permitted such deep foreign penetration of its military infrastructure? The answer emerged from a leaked memorandum, stamped with both Russian and Venezuelan seals. A phrase appeared again and again: the continuity agreement? No explanation, no conditions. Only the implication that Venezuela had traded unprecedented access for one guarantee: the survival of the Maduro government during any domestic upheaval, a bargain of sovereignty for protection. But what happened next would push the Caribbean into a far more dangerous chapter. The warning didn't fall from the sky. It rose from the seafloor, where no warning should ever come from. At 9:30 in the morning, the USS Lassen detected a faint acoustic tremor, a vibration so slight the system nearly dismissed it as background noise. But the pattern matched something deeply classified: the resonant signature of a Russian auxiliary submarine, the same class used to plant covert sensor arrays in Arctic waters. The Caribbean was too shallow, too warm, too monitored, and yet the signature persisted. Then came the second shock. At 2:11 in the afternoon, during a routine Venezuelan drill off Puerto Cabello, a launch platform long assumed defunct suddenly roared to life. Instead of firing a standard missile, it released a Russian hypersonic test article, small, experimental, and terrifyingly agile. its trajectory bent and twisted in midair exactly like Russia's Pacific tests against U.S. carrier groups during high-tension periods. The USS Lassen repositioned instantly. A second U.S. Navy vessel moved into overwatch. Neither ship wanted escalation. But neither could ignore a weapon engineered to outrun any traditional missile defense system on Earth. Yet this was not the turning point. 3 days later, at dusk, an offshore Venezuelan platform flickered with unnatural activity. Technicians in dark uniforms connected Russian generators to a dome-like structure. Satellite imagery revealed the truth. A long-range radar array modeled after Russia's Kaliningrad systems, those designed to shadow NATO carriers. This one, however, pointed north, directly into maritime corridors used by U.S. destroyers. Caracas called it a weather experiment. The U.S. Navy knew better. The array wasn't just tracking ships. It was predicting where they would be 10 minutes later, feeding real-time data into a Russian satellite constellation. And then the Triangle Titan. China, operating through discrete advisory teams, began assisting Venezuela with AI-powered drone logistics, fine-tuning swarm launch protocols, and synchronizing supply routes for hybrid Russian-Chinese unmanned fleets. It was a perfect convergence. Russia provided the weapons. China provided the algorithms. Venezuela provided the battleground. But the most unsettling moment arrived next. At 11:58 in the evening, an unidentified submarine surfaced just 12 nautical miles from U.S. territorial waters. No flag, no transponder, no signal. It lingered for 6 seconds long enough to be observed, then slipped beneath the waves, vanishing into waters where no submarine should have been able to hide. What precisely was Russia building in the Caribbean? And how far was Moscow prepared to push this new frontier? By the time the ghost submarine vanished beneath the Caribbean waves, Venezuela was no longer changing. It was being rebuilt, not by Caracas, but by Moscow and Beijing. The first transformation came at dawn. Russian engineers, escorted by Venezuelan military police, erected rows of AI-powered surveillance towers across Caracas, Maracaibo, and Valencia. These were not cameras. They were crowd prediction nodes, systems capable of mapping unrest before it even appeared. Officially labeled urban modernization, leaked documents exposed their real purpose: regime preservation at any cost. Then China stepped in silently, efficiently. Teams of Chinese technicians entered under cultural exchange visas, only to vanish into military compounds at odd hours. Their mission: merge Chinese swarm routing software with Russian strike drones already delivered through midnight cargo flights. The result was unprecedented in the hemisphere: a hybrid drone fleet capable of autonomous, coordinated swarm attacks. By mid-afternoon, civilians began noticing the shift. Drones hovered above markets, buzzed along highways, tracked movement from rooftops. Some were Russian, others Chinese. A few were Venezuelan shells filled with foreign circuitry. To civilians, the sky felt different: watched, measured, occupied. Then the information war ignited. State television launched the new era of protection, portraying the U.S. Navy as intruders and Russia as the nation's guardian. Simultaneously, thousands of coordinated social media accounts began pushing identical narratives later traced to a digital influence hub outside Moscow. Yet the deepest transformation unfolded far from the cities. In the oil fields, Venezuela began shipping crude to Russia at bargain rates. In return, Moscow did not send currency. It sent unmarked military police units. These forces trained Venezuelan troops from 5:30 in the morning until nightfall. Their focus was not border defense. It was urban suppression. A U.S. intelligence memo summarized the shift in one chilling line: Venezuela is becoming a geopolitical lockbox. Moscow holds the key. And the lock tightened further. As each Russian system came online, coastal radars, encrypted communications nodes, electronic warfare bunkers, a widening intelligence blackout formed across Venezuela's shoreline, zones where U.S. destroyers and aircraft could no longer gather reliable data. The implications stretched far beyond politics. They reshaped hemispheric security. But the most alarming discovery surfaced during a late-night review of intercepted transmissions: a code name, Project Orinoco 7, a document marked Joint Strategic Continuity Agreement. One clause stood out stark, undeniable. Russia would retain direct operational control of specific Venezuelan military assets during any national emergency. In plain terms, if Venezuela faltered, Russia, not Caracas, would command key base. The Caribbean had just taken a new shape, one built on silence, dependency, and foreign leverage. But when Washington uncovered the final page of that agreement, what it revealed sent shockwaves through every level of U.S. defense planning. For months, Washington believed it understood Russia's footprint inside Venezuela. It was wrong, catastrophically wrong. The cargo flights, the AI surveillance towers, the drone swarms, alarming yes, but still predictable. All of it fit Moscow's established playbook, until the ocean itself revealed what everyone had missed. At 2:49 in the morning, a U.S. Navy hydroacoustic buoy near the Aves Ridge detected a faint underwater distortion, a single pulse. 37 seconds later, a second pulse. Then again, and again. At first, analysts blamed calibration drift, but each night the signal sharpened, more deliberate, more engineered. On the fourth night, it unfolded into something impossible. A grid, a lattice, a map of listening nodes sprawled across the Caribbean seafloor. This was no submarine. It was a chain of autonomous undersea drones anchored to the ocean floor, silent, self-coordinating, and connected through quantum-resistant communication line. The design matched an experimental Russian system once tested near the Kuril Islands during tense Pacific standoffs. No one knew Russia had exported the technology. No one knew Venezuela had allowed its installation. And no one knew the system was already active. The implications were staggering. This network could hear everything, every destroyer, submarine, carrier, escort, or supply ship entering the Caribbean corridor. It wasn't surveillance, it was pre-targeting. A machine-built advantage capable of feeding firing solutions directly to Russian missile platforms thousands of miles away. And then came the most chilling revelation. The master node wasn't in Caracas. It wasn't even in Venezuela. It responded only to an encrypted command key inside Russia's Black Sea Fleet architecture, meaning Venezuela had no control, none at all. Its coastline had become a remote extension of Russian naval warfare. But the danger didn't end there. Encrypted metadata revealed China's involvement. Predictive algorithms woven through the network, refined from years of Pacific War simulation. These algorithms didn't just track U.S. Navy ships, they anticipated their movement arcs minutes in advance. A trinational system, hidden alliance, a strategic trap built beneath Caribbean waters. The crisis escalated at dawn. The USS Farragut unknowingly crossed one of the grid's trigger lines. Instantly, the entire network awakened, nodes blinking, relays activating, encrypted pings shooting north toward an unknown Russian endpoint. Inside the Pentagon, alarms erupted. Analysts crowded around screens as the grid reached full operational awareness. For 10 agonizing minutes, no one could answer the only question that mattered. Was this system preparing to track, to target, or to begin something far worse? The Caribbean was no longer an ocean. It was a silent battlefield waiting for ignition. And what the United States uncovered next would redefine the stakes entirely. When the underwater grid activated at dawn, Washington finally saw the crisis for what it truly was. Venezuela hadn't tilted toward Moscow. It had been absorbed by it. Inside the Pentagon, senior analysts gathered around live feeds from the USS Farragut as the destroyer held its course calm, steady, defined by decades of disciplined naval doctrine. There was no panic, no abrupt maneuver, only the quiet precision of a fleet that has prevented wars long before they began. But even that calm carried weight. As intelligence teams decrypted fragments of the grid's data flow, a new understanding emerged. Russia's strategy was not about launching missiles. It was about reshaping outcomes before conflict ever reached the firing stage. An adversary who knows your every movement doesn't need to strike. It only needs to imply the possibility. Venezuela had sought protection for the Maduro regime. What it received instead was dependency woven through ports, airfields, command centers, drone factories, and now the ocean floor itself. With Chinese algorithms embedded in its networks and Russian drones in its skies, Venezuela surrendered the one resource no nation can afford to lose: strategic autonomy. Yet, amid the rising tension, another truth stood out, one that becomes clearest during moments of crisis. The United States and NATO remain the only stabilizing force capable of preventing great power rivalry from igniting regional chaos. The U.S. Navy did not respond with threats. It responded with clarity. Carrier groups adjusted posture with surgical precision. Missile defense envelopes quietly recalibrated. Back-channel intelligence networks warned Caracas that sovereignty cannot survive when leased to foreign powers. And NATO reinforced hemispheric monitoring without escalating a single confrontation. History teaches the same lesson again and again. Military strength exists not to start wars, but to prevent the spark from ever reaching the dry grass. If Venezuela believed Russian technology could guarantee eternal regime control, it miscalculated. Hidden alliances come with hidden costs, and one signature on one classified agreement can reshape an entire region for years to come. But the story does not end here. The Caribbean will remain contested. The underwater grid remains active, and Russia and China will continue weaving influence into vulnerable states. Somewhere beneath those waves, the grid is still listening, still watching, still predicting. And the question now looming over every admiral, analyst, and diplomat is brutally simple. If a foreign power can anticipate your next move before you make it, what does sovereignty even mean? If you believe strength prevents chaos, subscribe now. If you see it differently, tell us why. Your voice shapes this conversation as much as any warship or satellite.